Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us again today for another episode of Inside the Message. Absolutely. So glad to be back with you. I'm Brother T, and this is my beautiful wife, Reverend A.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about your message last Sunday, how to live from love.
Awesome.
Right? And we appreciate you being here, my companion. Thanks so much for joining in. If you're new to our channel, or if it's the first time you've seen this video from whatever source it came from, you can find us at truethought.org, truethought.org. And our ministry is called True Thought Spiritual Community. And you can find us on YouTube at TTSC, True Thought Spiritual Community.tv. TTSC.tv. That's how you find us. Okay, so let's jump in.
You ready?
Okay, so the week before last, we had Living from Love, and then last week it's How to Live from Love. Mm-hmm. And congratulations, you had tons of views on that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Glad to get that message out there to so many people, because I think it's so important with what we're experiencing right now. Mm-hmm. And so you talked about several things. You had a quote from Tennessee Williams.
I sure did.
Right. So what was I loved the word Mercurial. What's Mercurial mean?
That's great. See, we actually looked it up together. We were guessing what it meant. And actually, I forgot the actual, Webster dictionary definition. But Mercurial is, hard to get your arms around. It's like all over the place. Is that good enough?
I think that's good enough. I think the root word is Mercury. Right? Mm-hmm. And so somebody was telling me when we talked about that the other day that when they were a kid, that they would take a drop of mercury and drop it on the floor, and it would splatter into, hundreds and hundreds of little bitty small balls, and you can't gather them up. They're just, it can't be contained, and it can't be, I guess, held. And I think that's kind of like the thing about being in the world rather than, being of the world, rather than being in the world rather than of the world kind of thing.
Right.
Because we can absolutely, that's going on a lot, right? That we're getting caught up in the world is pretty easy with everything that we've experienced last year and what we're experiencing right now this year. Mm-hmm. It's only a couple of weeks into the year, but it's been very mercurial.
Right. And so the ego mind loves nothing more than that, to go on the little hunts all over for different aspects of a thing, and keep us scattered and separate.
And I think it's really kind of a hunt to find meaning in the world. So it's to find meaning in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I think the quote from Tennessee Williams really kind of pointed to the seek but do not find aspect of trying to find meaning in the world. Mm-hmm. Would you comment on that a little bit?
So the reason I selected the Tennessee Williams quote is because it says very specifically that only love will save us. Only love will save us. Not only is it a mercurial world, it is also a world in which we find that the house is burning, or that the building is burning, and that the only thing that you can save that is worth anything from anything that is burning, or from any structures that are crumbling, is love. And that love will save us. The other aspect of the poem that I truly love, and actually I'm not sure it was a poem, but of the writing that I really love, is that how do we do that? We love those who are around us, those who are with us, and that we share our love by sharing the art that we're compelled to give to the world. And so to me, in that, there is an anchoring of, in this world that seems to at times be burning or all over the place, that only love will save us. And we do that simply by loving those who are with us, who are around us, and by being that extension of love through giving the art or the gift that we are here to extend. And that's the only thing that we take with us. So the reason I also love that last line that said this is the only thing that we can actually take with us is that last week and 2 weeks ago, when you started this topic, you started with individuals who were who had a prognosis, who were facing their transition, their death. And then the question became, was my life meaningful? And I think that the poem kind of tells us how to have a meaningful life, that the only thing that we really take with us from this lived experience is love. And so if we know that, then why would we not be focused on love throughout our lives? The philosophers that I also mentioned, Plato and Socrates, mentioned that practice dying. And in Christian terminology, it's die daily. We die daily to that which no longer serves us. And we awaken to the only thing that's real, the only thing that we take with us, which is love. And so that was kind of laying the foundation for the conversation of how to live from love, was kind of laying the foundation of how powerful love is and how eternal it is. It's the only reality, and all this mercurial aspects of this experience scatter off into nothingness from which it came. And so why are we so focused on that? Focus on what really matters and what is lasting and eternal.
Right. And something else that you spoke of that really struck a chord with me was you used the term humility. Why is humility so important to us as aspirants on a spiritual pathway? Where does humility come in? We talk about being loving, we talk about being forgiving. Forgiveness is a big deal, right? But we do talk about humility here at True Thought. But I'd just like to pick your brain a little bit about, just expand on, what is the importance of humility in the process of self-realization?
Right. Humility is truly a prerequisite of self-realization and of, the idea of awakening. And I framed the awakening to our true self, to our true identity, and or awakening to our oneness with one another, but our oneness most particularly with Creator, with God, with Spirit. And the reason humility is so important is because it's recognizing that the ego mind, or the mind that we have made the world that we're experiencing, thinks it knows. And why would one need to wake up? One would need to wake up if what they are currently experiencing is not working. If what they are currently experiencing is now seen to be a dream, seen to be an illusion. And the mind that created the illusion, why would we listen to that mind? It's the humility of, wow, okay, maybe I don't know. And maybe there's an aspect of my mind that does know. And the conversation in the message that I gave about humility came with the practice of the holy instant, which is where we pause and we connect with our higher self, our divine self, and we ask what the truth is. There's a humility in that because it is presuming then that I don't know the truth, or of my separate self, I don't know the truth. Of the mind that created the dream, of the mind that created the illusion, I don't know. And that's a first step in the offering of to the higher mind that does know, of awakening.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes when we've discussed it, we've talked about, because people can think that humility is humiliating, and the humiliating aspect of it is the prospect of humiliating the ego mind. But we don't really need to actually go there per se. To me, there's a divinity or a devotion of humility, of saying, of my own self, I do nothing.
Well, it's certainly not the practice of the ego, right? But when I was growing up, my dad would get, I have a mechanical mind, right? And so there were some things that I could do that he couldn't yet see, even when I was like 12 years old. And so he would get angry with me when I would say, well, and I would figure something out before he could, and he would get angry, He would just, I think not angry at me, but just, he would be maybe a little embarrassed for himself, and maybe that was a little humiliating for him. But the point is that he would call me Mr. Know-It-All, right? And I hung my hat on that. I'm like, yeah, I know he was saying it in a negative way, but my ego's like, yeah, that's right. I know, I know this, I know that. And it wasn't until I began to study about how to interact with people and how to be more accommodating in conversation, how to be patient and let people speak. And, because came from a family of a whole bunch of kids, and it's like you had to just jump in and scream in and, say your piece. And we were talking all over each other all the time, right? But, and so that's how you would express your intelligence or your knowing or your participation. And it was humiliating, I think, for my ego, for me to finally say, wait a minute, maybe I don't know. In fact, I'm going to make the declaration, I definitely don't know. And as I was willing to do that more and more, I feel like for myself, I began to learn another term that you used in your talk, but it was something that I really was struggling with for a long time, is understanding the meaning of it. But it's a word that you used in a teaching that you shared about grace. So how does grace and humility work together?
Humility opens us to receiving grace, and grace is not withheld. It is something that. So let me just say, my understanding of grace is that when we say the kingdom of heaven is at hand, when we say things like, wholeness already exists, it already is given, it already is. When we say things like you are a holy and beloved child of God, and your inheritance is good, is unlimited, all of those things are aspects of grace simply because of who we are, simply because of what we are. And as children, as the sons, the offspring, the daughter, the extension, the word of God. So that's what we come from. In this experience, we have separated ourselves off from that. And humility, when we can say, Gia, I don't know, but I am willing, you're really saying, I'm willing to receive. I'm willing to receive a higher understanding. I'm willing to receive. It's already given, but I'm willing to accept it and to receive it. That humility is as if we're tilling the soil of our consciousness with humility, and that humility gives that spaciousness and the openness to receive the seeds of grace that are already being showered upon us. And so that's how I would view the relationship between humility and grace. And I also talked about, extra grace required. So that's how we receive grace, but then to give extra grace to those who are struggling, and to give that spaciousness to those who might be reacting to us, who might be projecting on us, those who we might think don't deserve, understanding. We can actually give grace by being patient with one another, by seeking to understand rather than to be understood. We can actually cultivate grace and graciousness in our relationships that are difficult by having the understanding that, somebody's having a hard day, or I may not know what somebody's going through. So I'm instead of telling what I know, I'm just going to listen and love. And that's how we give grace to one another.
Right. Well, often when we have these conversations, it looks like we're kind of trying to rein the ego in, so that it's behaving better or acting better. Is that what we're working towards here? Or are we to set that self aside and to connect?
So really,
with a different way of being.
Exactly. We teach that there are two thought systems, and it is said that a house divided cannot stand. And in any given moment, we're in one thought system, the thought system of fear or the thought system of love. And so what you're really asking is, we are really turning away, and through humility, through the holy instant, through seeking to understand rather than to be understood. We're really creating a spaciousness around the fear mind, the mind of fear. And what is fear? Fear constricts. Fear wants to constrict everything. And when we pause, we create a spaciousness. And with that humility of, I don't know, I can then turn to the voice of love, the mind of love. And then I'm in a different thought system. So you like to teach that we sidestep or we ignore the ego mind, which is the mind of fear. But I'm not one. I think what we resist persists. So I don't like to make an enemy out of the ego. I don't like to say, I'm going to strangle it. I'm just going to pause, let go, and turn to the mind of love, because this is nothing anyway. It's made a whole world. But in and of itself, the only power, the only thing that saves us is love and the mind of love.
I think that's where humility comes in. Really, if we can get our egos to our persona, the identity self that we've created or made, as you said, to just take a back seat, and it's really, control seems to be such a big issue with my process of just getting myself to just let go of the idea that I need to be in control. And that's a huge step. So I want to talk about just to touch on this idea or this teaching that we talk about often is called the holy relationship. Because I think the beginning of the holy relationship is that first step of kind of reining in our obsession with control, where we can say, wait a minute, instead of me, watching the thoughts, which we call mindfulness, right? And thoughtfulness and mindfulness. But mindfulness to me is stepping back and watching the thoughts in my mind and recognizing that I'm not those thoughts, that's the stream of ego thoughts, especially if I'm in this mode of controlling. And then, I follow in the practice of saying, okay, well, obviously I can't control anything. That's where I think humility, that element of humility comes in. And then asking for the grace of knowing the truth, which is the connection, the dialogue with that other self. So we're always kind of talking about making a shift, between one way of being, which is to be kind of in hypnotized by the thoughts that are streaming from the world and through our own minds, and then stepping back from that and, as you said, take a pause and creating space. I love that, right? Because that's where we can see that the true self really, it embraces that self. It's not, and you're right, we don't want to make an enemy out of the ego at all. In fact, it is an aspect of who and what we are. So it must have been born out of love, one way or the other, of self-love, one way or the other, because everything is embraced in the love of God, even that self. So I think that's great advice, not to beat ourselves up, and we're not trying to retrain that mind to be better as much as what I've experienced along this pathway is to just set it aside, right? And then connect with the mind, which I like to refer to it as the mind of certainty. It is the mind of knowing, but it is the essence of certainty, but at the same time, absolutely humble, because its expression is only love. And I think that what you're leading us to in your talk was the steps of how to be loving, and I loved the way you saw that and the way you expressed it.
Well, thank you.
It was beautiful. Yeah. So I want to ask you to just share the steps in these last few minutes of this conversation. for somebody that might not have seen your talk, what are the steps to live from love? If you can condense that briefly for us as you see it.
Yeah. So how to live from love and what came through in the conversation is that we begin with the goal in mind, which is why we're talking about individuals. What we learn from individuals who have had near-death experiences are those who are, faced with their passing and their death and what would bring purpose and meaning in my life. So we begin with the end in mind, with the goal in mind. What do you love in your life? And what is the art that you wish to bring forth, right? So we're following our heart and our desire. And so that's kind of the pre-step, if you will, is to be contemplating those things. What at the end of my life would I look back fondly on and go, wow, this is how I gave love. This is how I extended love. And so the pre-step is that the goal belongs in the beginning. And the first step for everything in what we teach is a return to our divine identity. And that divine identity is when we take that breath through the holy instant and we enter into holy relationship with our divine self, the capital S self, which is how you like to say it, the capital S self. And we turn within and we take a breath and we just ask, what is the truth? When we ask a question, we are practicing humility because we're saying, I don't know, higher self, true self, Holy Spirit, what's the truth in this situation? You like to also say the words, I love you, and just to feel that wash of love of the higher self and the smaller self or the ego self, with feeling that wash of love. And so the first step is this holy instant. In that holy instant, you can ask all kinds of questions. And I gave some of those examples, but what's the truth? How may I be loving? Teach me what this moment is teaching me. All of those are questions that we can bring into the holy instant and then just listen. And so then what I said was that when we do that, we create a spaciousness. I had opened with this idea that I was having an upset with another individual. And so who among us, we don't have those instances where we want to be right or where we want our opinion to be what is cast upon the other person, or we're upset by the conversation. And if we can, in that moment, and you can do it without anybody even know you're doing it, you can just pause and take a breath and ask those questions. It creates a spaciousness, which allows for that humility through asking the question, which opens to grace, and it opens to miracle mindedness. So all of those things are components in it. And then I also brought in the prayer of St. Francis. May I seek to understand rather than to be understood. So may I understand my brother or sister. And then what is the gift I can bring to that moment? What is the art I could share in that moment? This is how we live from love. And we do it moment by moment, breath by breath. I want to say one more thing. So that's kind of the how-to. But what do you do when you fail? When you believe that you've messed up? Like that's what happened with me in that situation I shared. You can go back. We can go back in our consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And we can begin to replay the scene. We replay it negatively all the time. Replay it from the holy instant and watch yourself. And in your visualization, in your mind's eye, see it anew and begin to exercise how you might do it differently. And when we play that out in our mind, in our consciousness, we're training ourselves to do that when it comes up again.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. Because there's no time, space, or distance in spirit in that mind. And things can shift when we go back and we heal something where we feel we fell short, where we feel as if we didn't live from love, which was your whole message a week ago. And so these two messages together, I think, are cornerstones of our teaching, and not only of our teaching, but how to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So last question. So as we do that, and as we practice that, and as we master that, what can we expect to change in our life?
What we can expect to change in our life is our perception. What we can expect to change in our life is to have shifts of perception. And as we have those shifts of perception, the experience of our life, the experience of how we see things shifts and changes. So you say this, and I love it when he says this. He says, the goal of our teaching isn't to get more things or even necessarily to have a better life. It is to wake up and to realize our identity. But those things will come. Those other things are like byproducts, the health, the wealth, the wholeness. That's not the goal, but it's a byproduct of the goal.
The effect.
The effect, yeah.
Yes, because we are the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I hear music.
Oh, do you? Well, they can't hear that.
They can't hear that? All of a sudden we can hear music, which must be our cue that it's time to close.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us. God bless you. We love you, and we hope you'll join us on our Zoom session tonight.
Yeah. Coming up right now. Yeah. We love you.
We love you.